Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, I just bought a reverse hyper machine. How to implement it for both strong lower back recovery and for late novice lifters, especially a lifter with frequent lower back pulls and cramps. Can I do it every day? Yes, you can do it every day. Here's what I'm going to recommend. I'm not going to recommend you try to get strong on it at first. I would say, as someone who needs to build up their work capacity in their low back, especially people, again, who've had pulls and cramps, do 25% of your max squat or your max box squat and build up to sets of 25. Get to where you can do 3 sets of 25 reps with that weight. And you may not be able to do it at first. You might find you can only do 10 or 15 with that weight. Build up to 25. And I would say actually do that for several months. Spend several months doing 3 sets of 25 with about 25% of your max squat. And you can estimate your max squat. Let's say you're running a late novice 5s program, right? It's going to be about 80% of your max. So you could assume that, just as an example, if you squat 80 kilos for 5, that your max is 100. Put about 25 kilos on the reverse hyper, okay? And where I would put my focus would be get stronger on your good mornings. Use the work capacity and recovery and restoration that you get from the reverse hyper to feed your good mornings. It will absolutely feed them. My good morning shot up as I started using the reverse hyper more and more. And that's one of the things I found. It is an exercise that will feed it. And there are other tricks that I use for my clients who don't have a reverse hyper, but if they have access to one, I can make their good morning climb. So use the good morning to do your heavier work, your 10s and things. Focus on 25s at 25% of your back squat. It will work phenomenally well. You can do it every day if you need to, 7 days a week. I would do that for at least a few months. And I think you're going to see a tremendous difference, and scale it up as your squat goes up. All right, next question. How do you fit running in without affecting recovery for one who has to run for military, law enforcement, etc.? It's a great question. And if you guys recall from the last week's thing, I don't actually advocate people run unless they're going to compete in running in some way. Their sport involves running, or they are required to for their job. And, I ran through this recently with one of my military guys. We got him really, really strong, but they were making him do so much running that he ended up getting a running-related injury. And the doctor actually said, yeah, the running is causing this problem, not the lifting. But they pushed him too hard with the running. Now, I'm not going to get into specifically what he does, but again, he is doing something in the military to where they are pushed above normal. So, he ran into problems with this. So what I would say that the most important thing you can do as far as it affecting your recovery is to add it in gradually. Make sure that your fatigue management involves the running. You need to watch the running volume that you do. Rather than worry about the training side, the lifting, do your normal lifting programming. You need to do the amount of running, the minimum amount of running that is necessary for you to reach your goals and benchmarks. Whatever performance benchmarks they're having you be tested on, you don't want to do more running than is necessary. You don't want junk miles. And that is something that I've learned talking with people like Viata, who literally does train people for those things, and running and lifting both concurrently, is junk miles. If you're going to be a hybrid athlete, as he breaks it down, which means you're doing something strength and endurance related both concurrently, at some sort of serious level, your running volume needs to be at the minimum. It needs to be at the bare minimum. So if they're going to test you at a 5K run, there's no reason for you to run longer than 5K. And you need to not accumulate junk miles. Your running needs to be the bare minimum necessary for you to hit the standards that are set. Right? So whatever the standards that they're testing you on, that's what you need to practice for. You need to have specificity there, and don't run a single mile a week more than is necessary for you to maximize that performance. Right? You don't want to do a bunch of junk miles. Okay, and if you're only going to be tested at, say, a 5K run, don't run more than 5K. Go back and work on your strength outside of that. because again, the running will beat you up. The running can beat you up faster than the lifting if you're not careful. That's where you need to watch your volume. And it will be the same thing with your actual lifting. If you have to do a lot of running, you need to not do more volume that is necessary for you to optimize your performance. Okay? I would never have, if you guys watch, for example, the volumes I do with my own conjugate training, my volumes are relatively high. Okay? My only real cardio is low impact. I ride a bike. I do lifts on a bike. It's actually restorative. It doesn't beat you up like running. I would never have someone who runs or someone who does any sort of contact sport use the volumes that I use. I would never prescribe that. It would be lower. It's just not necessary. Okay, so we come back over to, if you're going to have to serve two masters, you need to optimize volume. You don't need junk volume in your lifting, and you don't need junk miles in your running. That's the most important thing you can do. Okay, because that's where you run into problems. When you start doing extra. If you're only doing one, you can get away with it. Not if you're doing both. All right, next question. Why can't we do more intra volume on a 3-day conjugate template when cutting? Could this work for bulking in theory? No, I wouldn't have you bulk that way. And here's the reason why, and this is someone I've discussed this with before, so he knows my stance. We've had a private chat on this. So when we cut down to 3 days on a conjugate when cutting, it's because your workloads and recovery are so mixed matched that you can't handle the volume that is involved with 4 days of lifting per week, that you can't recover. And when we can't recover, we start regressing and you lose muscle tissue quicker. Your goal when you're cutting is to hold on to the muscle and strength that you have. Okay? And if you lose body fat while doing that, if you can maintain what you have, that is an extremely successful cut. And the overwhelming majority of people fail to do that. Bodybuilders always fail to do that, by the way. They always lose muscle when they prep because they're getting so lean that you can't do it. And even drugs do not stop it at that point. They're going to lose some muscle. But generally, if we can keep what we have, that's good. So you need to be looking at, okay, well, what's the volume that I can get away with to keep my muscle? You know, unless you're doing a very, very slow cut and you're at a higher body fat. You guys have seen me do things like that because I'm not walking around at 12%. You guys have seen me do 10-pound weight loss phases. Barely mention it. People sometimes know, oh, you look a little leaner. And I do it slowly enough that I continue to make some progress during it. But that's very, very, very slow weight loss. We're talking less than a pound a week. Like 10 pounds in 12 weeks. And actually hit some PRs. Hey, that's the exception. But I'm also not doing it trying to be at 12% and then cut either. It's not going to work. So the problem you have is the volume itself. So if you're cutting days, you're doing it to reduce the total volume. I mean, ideally, I would rather have someone usually train the 4 days and just trim some of the accessory volume down. That's what I would rather do. I mean, we could make an argument. I mean, and I could actually make the argument for a full max effort. You could get away with a push-pull legs 3 days a week. And I know that sounds like blasphemy from some of the stuff I've said in the past, but I could actually probably program it and make it work very, very, very well. Okay? It could be done on a max effort only system. Wouldn't do it with max and speed work. But that aside, if you're trying to do a full normal conjugate rotation, you're better sticking to the 4 days as long as you can. And then you cut to 3 when you can no longer handle the volume. Because the 4, with the way that system works, gives you more optimal frequency on your maxing and dynamic of the overlap. We go to 3 because some athletes are in a situation where they just cannot handle the workload due to the other things going on. But the 4 is generally, for that sort of system, going to be slightly better. It's going to be better. So again, if you're cutting down to 3, you're doing it to reduce volume. Why jack the intra-session volume back up? Especially when it's interfering with your main lifts at that point. The only intra-session volume you'd be cranking up would be more accessory work. But we're cutting down to 4 days to 3 days because we can't handle all the accessory work anymore. And we need to keep it in. At least some of it. So hopefully that explains it. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.